Okay. Looks like we're live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. I'm here today welcoming a really special guest. His name is Lyon, and he is a transformational facilitator and co-founder of Earth Pulse LLC. He spent the last 10 years traveling around the world, studying with some of the very best in the fields of coaching, personal development, and spiritual liberation. Dylan's capacity to support you in your personal awakening and meaningful living comes from a deep well of experiential wisdom. And he coaches clients in the same way he lives his life, with a fierce tenacity and passion for the exploration and activation of human consciousness. So I'm really excited to have you here, Dylan, to bring that deep well of experiential wisdom. It's something that when I came across your work, I just sensed that you had that. And, I don't often feel that in people immediately off the bat. And I just have the sense that you've gone through it, you've done your work, you've probably faced a lot of challenging things in your life to have gathered that wisdom. And I'm really excited for you to share that with our audience.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So before we get too much into the interview, do you want to share a little bit about Earth Pulse? Because that's your current project, correct? And I just want to give you space to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Earth Pulse originally it came out of an idea that I wanted to help people. My business partner and I, so I have a co-founder, she's from Australia, but we really wanted to help people have tools to really work with psychedelics in a better way. We were both medicine practitioners in our own ways, and we realized that, it's not just about the experience, it's not just about the medicine, it's also about how you prepare yourselves before that, what tools are at your disposal, what inner work, what level of consciousness are you coming in with, because all of that joins you the moment you step into that kind of medicine space. Like what you are, what you bring is, what's coming in with you, right? So how we prepare people, not only with integration afterwards, which we do that as well, but also preparation beforehand. We really saw that preparation piece really missing. And that was a piece that, because both my business partner and I had cultivated that for ourselves, we were able to have experiences in the psychedelic realm that most people don't really understand exist yet. And the results we're able to get in that space were really beautiful. And so we thought, okay, let's actually give people the tools and the understandings and the experience and start to integrate spirituality, psychedelics, but also more grounded tools and practices and some of the science as well, and see if we can put this together. And so what Earth Pulse is, it's a place where you come to evolve your consciousness. It's a place where you come to heal, grow, expand, transform, all of that good stuff in a grounded and integrated way. Mm-hmm. And we have this really exciting moment in history right now where, because of technology, all of a sudden, instantaneously, all the world's wisdom is available at our fingertips. We never had anything like that before, right? And so from all different cultures, from science, from spirituality, from the Buddhist monks in the mountains, from different religious backgrounds, from all the different pieces are suddenly becoming revealed to us. And what I see as the future right now is who can start to put that picture together the fastest. Because I believe that part of what human beings have been doing ever since we kind of emerged onto the scene as conscious beings, so we've been trying to figure out who the hell we are. What are we? What is this? What is going on here? Why are we here? Why are we aware? Animals aren't aware. Why are we aware in this way? And so we've been trying to piece that together, in different societies and different cultures for a very long time have been doing that in a plethora of different ways. And now it's starting to become, okay, we have all of these information. How do we start to weave that tapestry together to potentially reveal a more integrated picture? And so part of what Earth Pulse was that desire of, okay, we have a wide range of experience. Can we start to synthesize all of that and bring it together in a way where, as opposed to that being divisive, it's actually, we look at the threads underlying that are inclusive and start to tell a clearer narrative of our story and our potential moving forward as human beings.
Love that, man. That really aligns with what feels like my life's work, which is really about this kind of cross-pollination of ideas, both spiritual, scientific, from all different traditions. I'm always kind of looking at the threads that tie them all together and the similarities. And obviously that's a few lifetimes of work, but maybe we can get close to it in this lifetime with all the access to the information that's available to us all. Yeah, very cool, man. I'm curious from your perspective, working, having worked with psychedelics a lot, supported people working with their journeys. I mean, what historically the relationship between people and these sort of medicines that have been discovered throughout the world in different contexts from different plants, like what would you say, like how did this evolve? Like why is the human organism have these sort of mechanisms that can unlock with certain medicines in the body that kind of open us up and expand our consciousness? What's your take on that?
So I'll give you my take, and I'll give it to you in a bit of a metaphorical kind of story format. It's also a great foundation for us to just kind of launch into the conversation from. I'm not saying it's the truth. I'm just saying consider it as a possibility, play with it, right? And a lot of different spiritual teachings have a similar idea. So the way I see it is that consciousness, reality, God, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter to me. That underlying energy, that force that is making the universe exist, right? There's something in there that's causing this, and we don't really understand it, but it seem to exist just by the fact that we're all here. And so that force, in some way, wants to play a game with itself. And the way it plays a game with itself is it needs to forget itself. And so you create a planet, and the planet is a bit like a video game, is a good way to think about it. And then consciousness kind of separates into this tiny individual creature called a single human being, and then immediately starts to play the game of life, right? And it's an adventure, it's an experience, it's an opportunity, and there's as many ways to play the game as there are people. One of the deals with that, though, in order to play the game, consciousness, whatever is so vast that we can't conceive, in order to play the game, the second it gets born, it has to forget itself. So you can kind of think about it like the second you come through the vessel of the womb and into reality, your memory is wiped. You have no idea that you came from divinity or that you're connected to that. You believe you're actually separate, right? And you're nothing but everything that's contained within a bag of skin, right? And you walk around as if you're that. And so within that, there's a bunch of different ways that we might play this human game. Most of them involve what I call playing the game straight, meaning you don't question the game too much. You just live your life, right? You live out the story of a human life, and you can do that lots of different ways. But you get married, you have kids, you build a life, you have this identity. You do it all kind of relatively normal based on how humans function in our world. But then there's this other game that exists, and it's the essence of spirituality. And that game is, what if I start to play the game of realizing that maybe I'm in a game, right? And it's that like, what if I'm in a dream, and as opposed to just dreaming, I consider the possibility of waking up in that dream, or realizing you're in a simulation, if you want to take that perspective, right? There's lots of different ways we could talk about that, but the idea is the same. It's what if I start to uncover the fact that I'm dreaming in some way, and I want to wake up to that. That is spirituality, as far as I can tell, and it's very, very essence. There's lots of different paths to do that, a yogic path, a meditative path, whatever. But it's all about the question of what is the nature of reality at all, and why am I here? And is it possible that I'm a lot more than I thought? And can I wake back up to that and discover this potential, which we really don't know the limits of as human beings, right? And so as you start to pull on that thread of curiosity, and maybe it's like synchronicity pulls you in, or an odd moment pulls you in, or something kind of gets you curious about reality itself, and you start pulling on that thread and pulling on that thread and pulling on that thread, and what happens is you start to leave the normal game that society is playing, and you start to walk a spiritual path, going on a completely different direction in life, where you go on the path of, I want to wake up from this entirely and see what's really going on here. That's a whole other arena, right? And so what I can tell is psychedelics is they're the ultimate Easter egg, to use a video game terminology, right? An Easter egg is like, it's when the computer programmer puts into the video game something that's clearly not supposed to be there, that would encourage the individual to realize that they're in a game, right? Something's off. So you go behind like a secret door, and then there's like, a big thing of balloons. It's like, what are these balloons doing here? It has nothing to do with the context. But what it does is it encourages you to consider, hey, wait a second, this has all been programmed in some odd way into the game, right? So Easter egg is encouraging you to kind of figure out that you're dreaming. And as far as I can tell, psychedelics are the world's greatest Easter egg. It's a gift from the Mother Earth that says, hey, if you're curious to know, by the way, nothing you think about how reality is exactly what it is. Everything's way deeper, way vaster, way more obscure, way more, peculiar than you've ever thought possible. And these odd psychedelic drugs, if we're going to call them that, expand your consciousness or melt all your belief systems in a way that you can have experiences where you go, fuck, I thought I knew what life is about. It turns out I don't know a goddamn thing. And it's way bigger than I've ever possibly imagined, right? And so they kind of decondition us in this really odd way, which I think is, when done correctly or safely, is very, very healthy for us, because we do become very rigid in how we're living our lives. And the psychedelics kind of break that rigidity and open us back up into possibility again. And that's why they're used a lot to help people reset their lives, because you start to think about those foundational questions about who am I and what am I doing and why am I here and all that kind of stuff, that when we're kind of on autopilot in our lives, we can just forget about, and you're not really asking those types of questions. And the psychedelics make that, they bring it up to you in a way that it's just undeniable. So, and the reason why I say that as well is because it doesn't make any sense that they're here, right? So if you think about psychedelic mushrooms, it's like, okay, why did the mycelium, whether or not they knew whatever is an accident, biology, it doesn't matter. But if they just wanted to kill you, why don't they just poison you and kill you? That's that. Why do they do things that can radically alter your perception of reality to the point where one experience of it can sometimes change your life completely? It's like, what's the relevance of that from the mushrooms perspective? Why have that effect on these mammals? Why is if you've ever heard of this one, this isn't a more obscure one, but it's interesting to think about. Bufo alvaris, right? It's the strongest concentration of DMT that we know on the planet, and it lives in the glands of a frog in the deserts of Mexico. They stay dormant all year long underground. And then when the rains come in the summer, they come out to be in the rain. And so there's this tiny window where the single most powerful substance on the planet comes out, and it's contained within the body of a frog and has to be captured and extracted and then smoked. But then if you were to do that, everything about this reality would completely dissolve for 5 minutes, and then you come back and you have to confront that. It's very odd that that's there, and that it's hidden, so to speak. Like, you have to really go digging into the threads to find that substance. You have to really want it. And it's when you get to those types of psychedelics, that's dangerous. You're really pushing the edge of what a human being can endure, to go play with things like that. But they're these ridiculously potent substances that, from a logical sense, shouldn't be here. And yet they are, and they're everywhere. And human beings have been using them for arguably tens of thousands of years. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
It is. Yeah. So I watched some documentary the other day. I think it just came out on the experience with that 5-MeO DMT, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was just called 5-MeO, but it's worth checking out. It's kind of just from the perspective of these like pretty ordinary dudes, like a group of friends that get together, and like, most of them are inexperienced with psychedelics, and they just decide to go on this frontier together. And it's a really kind of moving, humble experience in relationship to these really profound medicines and experiences that they encountered. And I want to say, like, related to that, sort of take on what's actually going on this planet, and the sort of game metaphor. I've had a lot of experiences with psychedelics where I came out of it sort of with that realization of having my mind completely blown open, and like, recognizing the substance of the universe, and the vastness of this greater truth that is beyond the mind's comprehension. And I think some of my experiences were like me wanting to hold on to that experience and kind of bring it back into the normal reality that I tend to exist within. and I think in that desire to kind of grasp, there was, this, and also a recognition that I would ultimately lose it all and forget it all. I'd kind of that same as like the birth experience. I would kind of come back to this world, and like everything that I had kind of realized and recognized, somehow I got like a thin sliver of it, or at least in the sense that I could speak about it, wrap my head around it in any kind of tangible way. And I guess that brings me to your experience with, integrating these experiences that people have, and helping them to really, I guess, utilize the potential of these medicines to really create transformation in their lives. And I will say, in my own experience, I've gone into it not always in a real intentional way. It's been not completely recreational, but not super structured. And um, I'm curious if how much of that has to do with like the kind of takeaways, and what I can actually work with in my life. Um, yeah, so I'm just curious your take on like setting an experience up for the integration to really make some shifts in the real world.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, for one, as far as I can tell, I have no issue with using these things semi-recreationally, meaning I've gone to festivals and taken a bit of mushrooms here or there, or whatever the thing was. And of course, when I was younger, it was even less intentional because I understood less. But even then, it was still semi-intentional. Like maybe it's me out in nature in the forest, and that might not be a quote unquote ceremony, but it's also not, let's get fucked up with my friends. You know what I mean? Like there's a balancing point in that. But people can learn and grow and heal and have amazing realizations with psychedelics in a more recreational or like relaxed setting. Friends hanging out, but with intention, that kind of thing. Amazing stuff can come out of that. So I don't think that that's inherently bad, or that everything should be overly ritualized. What I think is that when you start to approach these medicines with more intentionality, with respect, with a little bit of reverence, and I say reverence because if you've had powerful journeys, then that's exactly a good word to use. When you go into a ceremony like that, there's a bit of humility that comes with, you recognize that you're working with something that's so potent. And what I've noticed over my journey was that somehow it seems that the medicine knows what you're ready for, and it knows how you're showing up to the situation. So you have to remember with psychedelics, it's like anything could happen in there, to the most extreme, to the more subtle, and everything in between, to the deepest roots of hell, to the most expansive journey into heaven, and everything else that you could possibly conceive of. I've done a lot of journeys, and I haven't come to any type of conclusion that there's a limit to that. This is a huge array of what might happen to you, which is also part of the reason why they were legal for a long time. And part of the challenge of psychedelics is, well, how do I put this in a box? It's like, you're not going to be able to put this in a box. Sorry. And so that makes it very difficult, because by the way, I mean, we relate to most drugs or most things as, we want to know this caffeine pill does this to the body and creates this effect. This medication does this. Psychedelics, it's like all of that goes out the window. You really don't know. There's some science coming out about, let's say, neuroplasticity and things like that. But from an experiential kind of more subjective perspective, it's like it could go anywhere, right? And that's leads to things like people saying that it's the most profound experience of their life next to getting married or having a child. It's like, well, what the hell does that say? What does that mean? How do we frame that into our society? But what I've noticed is that it seems like the medicine somehow is able to kind of read you, and it meets you halfway a little bit, right? So it can say, okay, they're at level 2, let's say. They're not ready for the really crazy shit. And the journey will just tuck all that away for now and kind of meet you with where you're at and what you really need, which I think is actually really awesome and kind of beautiful, that somehow there's this kind of co-creative relationship between what you're ready for and what it will provide you typically, so that there can actually be a healthy experience with that, which is also one of the challenges I would say about people who've experienced these things as more recreational or they think it's a drug or whatever, is that the amount they're able to experience because of the way they showed up was kind of limited. And so maybe they think that what the psychedelics are, you know, oh, you see hallucinations and you kind of trip out and it's a drug. And it's like, okay, that was your experience of it, but I guarantee you there's an entire universe behind that waiting for you to go explore it. And part of what it's waiting for is for you to be able to kind of show up with that intentionality. So I noticed for me that the moment I started creating some intention wasn't, and just presence, just readiness, just kind of like, okay, I really want to go deep with this. I'd really like to experience some healing, or I'm ready for a bit more and I'm going to be really present with what's happening in my consciousness as I work with this. Those types of ideas, however you play with them, seems to radically open up what's possible. It's as if the medicine says, okay, you're actually ready for the real thing, and whole new doors open up. And so I would say that's really the importance and the utility of intention setting and kind of creating that space for yourself, is that it just will radically expand what actually you get out of it. You know, it's a bit of a rabbit in a hat, you know, so you have to pull.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say in terms of other practices that sort of expand your capacity to work with the medicine with more presence and more intention, to kind of stay with the intensity of the experience? Because I know for myself, there've been times where it's like, I just want to like leave my body, leave the experience because it's too intense, you know. Yeah. Are there practices or tools that you work with when you're not in a ceremony that help you to engage with the experience in a deeper way?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton. The very, very, very basics for anyone to know is just context and setting. Like, let's say you're going to have a journey tonight. I'll talk about what you could prepare before that too in your life. But let's just say you're going to have a journey today, context and setting, right? So if you're going to do a journey in your house, then clean your house, you know, clean it, because basically you have to think about psychedelics amplify everything, right? So if it's messy, if it's chaotic, and then you journey, all of that's going to be brought in, it's going to be amplified, right? So a lot of times intention setting is really just, let me mindfully clean my room, clean things up a bit, clean me up a bit, take a shower, clip my toenails, like whatever you kind of have to do to put yourself together a little bit actually helps bring that respect. And, you can kind of think about it like you have a lady coming over that, it's a third date or something like that. You'd like to set the space, it's the same thing. You're inviting a force, a relationship into your presence. And it's like, hey, let's be aware of that, right? If you don't, and you just, clunk, take the medicine and that's it, that's perfectly fine. But you're going to learn some things in that journey about what you did and didn't prepare and set up, right? So things like that. Also remembering that because your senses are heightened, little things can make a big difference, right? So having like music available that night that is ready. I might not want to listen to music the whole time, but it's nice to have the option, because the music will take my journey to a different place. And that can be helpful to go deeper. That can be helpful to pull out, to have music that feels positive. It can be helpful if you want to decide that you want to dance tonight. It's like the music can invoke your body to start to move, and that's great too. Like a thermos of tea, for example, I would always have with me. I just make it before I start, and it's hot all night. And if at some point I need that, like that little bit of, you can just imagine like, oh, the comfort of drinking a cup of tea, except it's 10 times more powerful when you're on psychedelics. So that's going to help you when you need that moment. Having a blanket nearby, having comfort set up, having your lighting that's kind of relaxed and dim and vibey and cozy, right? These little tiny things that seem silly, but then it makes a huge difference in there. And that's really, really nice. And it can help you kind of frame the space up for yourself. In a more deeper sense, I would say that your capacity to meditate is going to play a huge part, because let's say that you want to go inwards, right, with the journey. So you can either go outwards or inwards. You can kind of play with that. But if you go inwards, essentially what's going to happen is there are things inside of you, belief systems, emotions, patterns, fears, stuff you're unwilling to look at or have a hard time getting at because you can't see it. It'd be great if I could just take a folder out of my mind that talks about all my mommy issues and lay them out on the table and open it up and just start reading what the hell's in there. But it's much more difficult than that, because, how do I see that? It's just it's like an operating system, right? It's in there running me behind the show, but you have to figure out how to get to it. One of the things the psychedelics do is they amplify feeling and experience, and they can also really help kind of personify what is going on inside of us that we couldn't ordinarily get at. So my capacity to relax into that through meditation, let's say, and spend a good amount of time inside myself without, having no presence, enables me to get more out of that journey. So I used to tell people, for example, it's like if you can sit and meditate sober for 20 minutes, you can probably sit and meditate on psychedelics for about an hour, because the psychedelics are going to make everything a lot more interesting in your meditation. So you don't need to, you're not as bored, you're not trying to get out of it as much, but you still need to cultivate that practice when you're sober. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get very much. If you can meditate for an hour when you're sober, you could probably meditate for straight up 3 hours with a blindfold on a mushroom journey if you'd like. And there's so much more room to explore and heal and see parts of yourself and go through that, the more you're able to go inside, right? So the capacity to meditate or be present is extremely helpful. Any type of practice that kind of strengthens you. So if you do yoga, if you do Tai Chi, a little bit of mindfulness. I'm not talking about lifting weights necessarily, but something that kind of can help fortify you can be really helpful as well. Like, let's say you described those moments when you really want to get out of your experience. One way to look at that is, well, I need to surrender and relax deeper. Another way to look at that is maybe it's time for me to take a little break and I'll open my eyes and maybe I'll go into yoga for a little while, or I'll go into Tai Chi, or maybe I'll play music. Like if I play an instrument, maybe I'll play my instrument for a while and explore that for a little bit and kind of have something that anchors you, right? And like brings you back into that position of power or comfort or something like that. So any of those types of tools can be extremely helpful and useful.
That sounds great. Yeah, those are all things that I've employed at times, and it's a good reminder for me for future work that I do. So I think we've been pretty broadly talking about psychedelics as a whole, and not really specific ones, except for the 5-MeO DMT. Yeah, maybe we can just have you speak a little bit to some of the ones that you've worked with, and I guess if there's any kind of different approaches. I know for myself personally, like I've done much more like self-exploration with psilocybin, whereas the ayahuasca experiences I've had have really only been in the context of like group work. So yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, mushrooms, psilocybin is the closest to my heart. It's the first psychedelic I've ever worked with, and I've had 13 years of working with it fairly regularly. I would consider it my closest ally and plant friend in that way. I've worked with many of them, but maybe we just zone in on that right now, because also they're kind of getting the spotlight right now. They're having a moment in the Western society right now, more than any other, although the others are close behind, certainly. And that's a pivotal moment for Western civilization. As far as I can tell, to be perfectly honest, we need all the tools and all the routes, but I would say that a liberation of psychedelics from the dogmatic box of we should just throw these things out and they're dangerous drugs, back into this is something we've used as human beings for a very, very long time with deep reverence and put at a high esteem of importance for us. And to restore that back and start to use these things again in a real way, it's probably one of the absolute best things we could possibly do for ourselves as a civilization right now. I'm extremely passionate about it. I'm extremely excited about it because it's very fast in the results you can have. It's very experiential, so it helps us get out of the head a little bit. And it's just like, it's experiential wisdom, right? You have these profound experiences, and there's an element where, yes, it's subjective, but also no one can take it from you either, because it's so personal and so real to you. And we desperately need that shift in consciousness. And it's not the only tool by any means, but it's definitely one of the fastest. So to see psilocybin taking the forefront right now, I'm my business partner. He's very much into the marketing, and he's been doing a lot of research into this, and he recognized that the psychedelics as an industry right now have more money in it than marijuana, which is absolutely insane. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the country, which is good, bad, and many things all simultaneously. You know, it's gonna become a business and whatever, but really doesn't matter, because at this point, this late in the game, I mean, I'm generally very optimistic about the future of humanity anyways, but we have some serious things to deal with, and it really comes down to healing of the consciousness of individuals. We need to clean ourselves up, and I couldn't see anything more effective and fast and relevant than psilocybin right now. So I'm extremely excited about that. I also really love it because psilocybin doesn't really belong to any one culture. You know, if you think about ayahuasca, there's an element of, like, I wouldn't ever suggest that someone drinks ayahuasca on their own in their house. Ayahuasca is very much linked to the culture from which it's been held sacred by a certain culture for a very long time, right? Down in the Amazon, and a group of different indigenous groups have been working with that medicine for a long time. And the way that you kind of experience ayahuasca, in a sense, is that it brings you into that world. You know, it can bring you a little bit into this Brazilian Amazon jungle kind of a world, and the shamans know how to operate in that world, and they understand that world. And there's a very powerful link between the human beings who've been working with these plants and first discovered them, and the medicine itself, and the type of experiences that happen in there. And I don't think it's a good idea to necessarily separate those two things. I don't think there's any issue with having people who become very well trained down with those people to then take that into the world, because there's a lot of indigenous people who are actually in support of that. Some aren't, some are. It's kind of a complicated issue. I don't necessarily have an issue with that, because they understand the medicine and they've kind of trained down there, but it's still very culturally linked. Whereas with psilocybin's been used, and if I have this right, about 100 different cultures all over the world, and it grows in many different countries and many different places. And so I kind of refer to it as the people's medicine. It's for everybody. It doesn't necessarily belong to any one group. And in a sense, if I had to pick any one psychedelic medicine that belongs to, or at least we can also partake in it in a good way in the West, it would also be psilocybin. And the experience of it isn't so culturally bound either. It's not so much about any of that stuff. The psilocybin as a medicine itself seems to be a lot more interested in you as an individual. It's a lot more curious about what's going on in your consciousness, in your life, in your reality, and how could we make some adjustments or reveal some things, as opposed to trying to pull you into its world. It kind of shows up into your world. And that's an interesting distinction that I think makes psilocybin very good and relevant for us in this moment.
I love that perspective too, because I feel sensitive to the appropriation of other cultures, and like the idea of this being more the people's medicine, and having spread throughout the world, and different cultures probably there's different approaches to working with it.
Sure.
But I imagine there's a, no matter where we're coming from, whether we have a lineage that we're working with or not, that we can build probably more of that original relationship with it that any culture in that discovery mode would do. Yeah. So, another thing that I think I want to shift topics kind of soon away from psychedelics and talk a little bit more about your work and what you're doing with the the Earth Pulse. But one other thing I wanted to bring in that's gaining traction and popularity, especially in this sort of self-development world, is this idea of microdosing. And yeah, I'd love to hear if you advocate for microdosing as an effective way of working with psilocybin or other plant medicines, and if so, what might be a good approach to doing that.
I advocate it cautiously. I see positives and negatives. When it first kind of started to gain popularity, I was fairly in opposition to it, to be perfectly honest. But over time, I've kind of opened up to it, and I see that it has a role and it has a place. And I often work with a microdosing protocol myself. So I'll give you both sides. The cons to it, or the challenge with it, is that we have a dynamic where we want to take something that is so profoundly powerful and kind of minimize that into the idea that it's like a supplement for neurogenesis and stuff like that. It's awesome that it has that effect, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. And there's nothing wrong with using that. But I hesitate to start to take something that's so important and try to start to shrink it down into something that narrow. And I also hesitate to advocate for people to not take larger doses and just start to work with these very gentle doses. I would say that the journey of psychedelics is a lot more of like a hero myth. It's a lot more of like, you're about to go on a journey to confront yourself or confront reality or do whatever it is you need to do, and don't shy away from that and hide it under the guise of, a supplemental microdose of some sort. So that's kind of the part where I'm like, well, given how important this force is, I don't really want it shrunk down that much. Obviously, the positive side of that is that there's really awesome science coming about how it helps people in a micro fashion. And I think that's amazing. For me, I do both. I have my larger journeys and I have my microdosing journeys. And I also find that having the microdose consistently helps me just kind of stay connected to the energy of that medicine. So I also like to look at these things like you're building a relationship with that plant. And herbalists would tell you the same thing. There's a lot of people that would talk about the consciousness of plants. And so it also helps me just kind of continue to cultivate that relationship, have it on my mind, get it in my system, even if it's subtle or I can't perceive it, but at least I know that it's happening. And, you get the neurological benefits as well. I think that, so I think that it has its place, and I can also see how it's helping the mainstream open their minds back up to psychedelics. And I think that's really probably the best thing, because there's a lot of people who would be terrified to take a higher dose or would still have the old idea that, these things are just drugs or they should be illegal, whatever. And the science of microdosing and that kind of thing is really helping kind of open people back up to it. And I also understand very well that what might start out as a microdose right now might eventually, encourage people down the path of, well, what happens if I take, a gram or a gram and a half, right? And so it starts to kind of open itself back up into the deeper journeys. And I think in that regard, it's very good.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome, man. I really loved your insights on all that, and something that I'm deeply curious about, and learned a lot just hearing you speak. I'd love to hear a little bit about, my understanding is you've mostly been living kind of a nomad lifestyle for the last 10 years. And yeah, I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about that. What kind of led you down that path? How's it working for you? All that.
Cool. Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of California. Very normal, quote unquote, kind of a life, very cookie cutter as far as I could tell. And the simplest way to explain it was simply, no matter how hard my parents tried, the cultural conditioning never really stuck. I had the unfortunate experience of never really fitting in. I didn't fit in. It felt like any room I stepped into, somehow I didn't fit in. And of course, that created a lot of challenges for me in my life. But the other side of that was that I was very inquisitive, I was a deep listener. And for whatever the reason, and I'm sure there's some people listening to this that would understand this, it's like I questioned things way more than I should have. And I had that capacity that children tend to have, where they can actually see a lot of truth. They're not nearly as stupid as we like to think they are. They can actually see a lot of things. And I was kind of one of those kids who would just always be asking. I'd be taken to the Christian church. My parents were religious, and there'd be like, I'd be asking about paradoxical things going on, pointing out certain things. And then I would get answers that still didn't make sense. And even 12-year-old me was like, this seems crazy. This just doesn't make any sense to me. And, there's a balance between being young and stupid and naive and arrogant with that, and also some, truth in that. And it kind of, they get blended together in some weird fashion when you're young. And so I kind of grew up in that way. And I think by the time I was 18, I really just kind of fell into a depression, to be honest, is what kicked it off. And the depression seemed to stem from this feeling of everything I've been told doesn't seem to be true. And my parents seem to be not telling the truth. Society doesn't seem to be telling the truth. And no one's been willing to answer my questions. And I don't know what the hell is going on here. And why are we living the way we're living? Why are we why are we working jobs that we hate? Why aren't we connected into our hearts? Why, all these different types of questions that it felt as if the whole kind of structure was just not really true. And so that was really difficult, because I grew up with this feeling that you're being lied to in some way. innocently in a sense, because when we adopt that kind of conditioning, my parents also believed what they believed. So it wasn't always deceitful, but from my perspective, it certainly felt that way. And so when I was 18, I was supposed to go to college. I was supposed to go on a normal path. I was working at a restaurant job. I was going to do the quote unquote normal thing and kind of fall in line. And something in me just kind of collapsed into this depression of like, I can't do this. If this is how I posed it, and it was weird for an 18-year-old, I think, but it was this feeling of if I actually do this and really become part of this mold, I'm going to have to let go of whatever remains of my heart. Whatever little bit of my soul or my deep down truth that I still have a connection to, it's going to die if I really try to fit into this society. And so I had this challenge of, well, do I stay and try to fit into the mold, or do I walk away from all of this and go search for something that felt true to me, something that was more than my little bubble, my suburban bubble, And it was a very kind of challenging and deep journey. I didn't know anything about. I had no one to lean on. I had no one to go with. It was purely just me and my heart, and something greater than me really helping me. And ultimately, I decided to quit that job. I broke up with my girlfriend. I told my parents I wasn't going to college. I grabbed $700 and a backpack, and I said I'm setting out to travel. And I don't even really know why, but there's something out there that has more meaning and has truth in it, and I don't know how to find it other than to just go. And so I had kind of accepted at that point that my life might fall apart. Maybe I'll die. Maybe I'll be homeless. Maybe I'm losing my mind. I had moments where I felt like I was completely crazy because every single person seemed to be fine with how society was functioning. And then I had other days where I felt like I was literally the only sane person I knew. And sometimes I was oscillating day to day with that. Am I the fucking crazy one if everyone else thinks that this is normal? Or, am I onto something and everyone's lost their minds? Like, how do I, And so when I finally left, it was definitely a surrender of like, my life might just completely fall apart now and that's it. I don't know where this goes. Maybe psychosis or homelessness or drug addiction, or God knows, if I just start living on the streets by my own out there in the world and I'm a young 18-year-old kid, like, I don't know where this takes me, but I'm just going to surrender over and go there. So I took a leap of faith ultimately, and I set out on this path. And I didn't know anything about spirituality or anything like that, but I had this feeling of something deep in my heart pulled me to take this leap. And so if I'm going to continue, I might as well just keep letting that deep down guidance, whatever the hell that is, continue to guide me and just make it that surrender experiment. Let's see where this goes. And so I made an agreement with myself right at the beginning that it was like, as flawed as I am, I'm going to do my absolute best to make every major decision from my heart, no matter how irrational, no matter how much it doesn't make sense. And I'm just going to really find out what happens to someone's life when they do that. And if no one else knows the story and I just end up dead, well, then I'll know that that's what happens when you do that, And if something else emerges, something else emerges, but we'll find out. And so at every fork in the road, half the time it was my mind says this, my heart says this. It was like time to jump again. And I just kept moving like that over the last 10 years. And it's taken me all over the world, taken me all over across the United States. I've backpacked in, I don't know, almost every national park. I've hiked at least 5,000 miles. I cycled from Seattle to Cabo San Lucas with these guys I met over drinks one night. I've studied in ashrams. I've became a mentor of mine was one of the top functional neurologists in the United States. I traveled around the world with him for 4 years, worked with psychedelics. I've lived in different communities. I was homeless for 5 years, literally sleeping on the streets, living off of a few dollars a day. I was a street musician. I was a dumpster diver. I got really, really rough for a period of time, and a million other different things that happened that have been absolutely up, down, challenging, lots of deaths, lots of rebirths, lots of revelations, lots of excitement, joy, passion, lots of loneliness, walking a very individual path for a long time. And slowly, I'll leave it at that for a moment. You can pose some questions, but I will say that after about maybe 6 years ago or so is when I first started to meet some different mentors. Some of them were men. I wanted to know one of my questions was, what does it mean to be a man in the world? That was a big question of mine for a while there because my upbringing was also very traumatic, and I had the exact opposite of what I would like to be in the world was what I got for a family dynamic. And so I had a lot of figuring out to do as well. And so I was looking for men, and I found mentors. I got into the idea of healing work and spiritual stuff, and then coaching. And I started, over time, I just got obsessed with helping people get in their hearts and live what I call their soul's journey, what they're really here to be doing that we're not doing.
Mm. I love that, man. A lot of it really resonates and parallels some of my journey from a pretty young age as well. Yeah, I'd love to hear you speak on something that I consider pretty important, but somewhat esoteric and hard for a lot of men that are heavily conditioned in this sort of mental way of operating to discover, unpack, and that's around listening to your heart. Like what does that mean? How do you know it's your heart and not your mind? All of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of the work that I do with people, obviously. Breaking people, I call it, break down, break through, and break into your own heart and soul. Somewhere down in there, we got to get back to it. Part of the reason why you don't know it's there is because you're so far away from it, you don't even recognize that you can go there and you can feel it, and it's actually very, very real. But if you've lived your entire life up in your head, which most of us do, myself included, it's where we're neck up and then we drive a body around. That's how most people think this thing works, but there's so much more to us than that, and so much more wisdom in our bodies, including our hearts from an esoteric perspective. So you have to break into it. And when people make the case that they don't know, they don't believe that, or they don't think that's there, I just think, well, you just haven't had the experience of it, right? So what the other thing too is to understand, at least as far as I can tell, being heart-centered or following your heart doesn't mean being super emotional, right? We kind of make that like, oh, well, my heart would be this very emotional kind of thing, very feminine, very whatever. And it's like, well, another way to think about the heart is that it's an innate, deep inner guidance system. It's really a compass, right? Like I call it the heart's compass. It's a thing that on a soul level is pointing you in the direction of your highest evolution at all moments. And if you fully started to live in alignment with it, it would take you on an incredible journey of healing, transformation, and becoming all you could become. So you can almost think about it like it's a compass that just is pointing towards your fullest potential in every moment. And you want that guidance, right? Because probably the issue with the mind, although I love it, and I believe in an integration of both, but part of the issue with it is that even biologically speaking, part of what it's designed to do is just keep the organism safe. It's a safety mechanism. It's looking for icebergs. It's looking for obstacles. It's pros and cons. It's weighing and measuring. It's problem solving all the time. And the issue with that is that I can only see what it can see in the moment, right? It's only what's right here. And the deeper part of us somehow knows almost in a rational way that it doesn't matter how much it makes sense to do this other thing. The heart and soul says I have to do this. You can think about it a bit like falling in love, right? It's like falling in love with someone from a purely logical perspective. It's probably one of the stupidest things you could ever do. It's highly dangerous, so you're going to intertwine yourself with this other person who's full of issues and pathology, and you're going to let all these chemicals, guide your behavior and your emotions, and you're going to try to make that work. You think that's a good idea? It's like, if we were all Spock, no one would ever fall in love, It's the deeper part. It's the heart that's like, I see that all makes sense, but that's not the point. Move that shit aside and jump forth courageously into your life, right? So that's how I kind of think about this kind of heart-centered guidance system. And one of the things is to figure out that it exists. And the best way to do that is really to be open-minded enough to not just throw things out because, your mind that says that's woo-woo or whatever the hell you want to call it, and instead go, okay, let me go find out for myself. And, there's meditations to work with that. There's feeling exercises to work with that. There's a lot you could do to go into the body and find that kind of feeling in that system and start to work with it. There's lots of different approaches, but you have to be open-minded to go, well, let me go have an experience of that myself and try to figure it out and see if there's any truth to that for me. And then the next piece is, if there is truth to that, how do I find the courage to potentially live from that place? And the last thing I'll say is what's really interesting as well is that you can think about it like, there's that idea that there's the war between your head and your heart. Well, in the beginning, it's all head, no heart, right? And then over time, you start to cultivate the connection to your heart and you realize, wait a second, maybe there's actually something to this, or there's some wisdom there. And then maybe you take a leap of faith once You bet on your heart at all the risk and all the ego that thinks that's a terrible idea. You bet on your heart, and then you realize that somehow in hindsight, although it didn't make any sense, it worked out, you know? And then you go, oh, that's interesting. And so then eventually you kind of, maybe you decide to take another leap and you do another heart-centered thing, big or small. And you get a little bit more evidence that, hey, somehow this made sense. And slowly what happens over time is that your mind actually starts to have a rational, like, evidence to support the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to go, well, you know, and then the mind goes, you know what, it doesn't make any fucking sense, but somehow the last 10 times I really moved from the heart, my life has improved every single time in some odd way, you know, and this whole other path that my mind couldn't see opened up when I did that. And so over time, your ego actually starts to kind of, your mind supports the idea of the heart. And as you start to do that, you know, the pendulum swings a bit and it becomes easier and easier and easier to make a heart-led decision, because not all of your mind is fighting anymore. And over time, the proper orientation, as far as I can tell, is that your heart is the compass guiding your life in a big way. And your mind's job is to help get your heart there, to help to get you there, right? So your mind should partake in problem solving, creativity, making it happen, focus, determination, all the things that the mind does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's designed to serve the general pathway of a deeper guidance. When you tell your mind or your head that it should figure out everything in your life, you know, you become manic and chaotic, because it's like, well, what about my compass? I don't have a compass. It's all head, all pros and cons, all analyzing. And there's not that deep part. You can also think about it like the gut. It could be a gut. Some people call it the gut. It doesn't matter, but there's that deeper part of you that says, no, this way. And that's what we need the reconnection with. That's what we need to let steer the ship. And then the mind kind of operates behind that to support the trajectory of the heart. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Yeah. And in my experience, it sometimes, and I've gotten this message on psychedelics multiple times, how, you know, the sort that inner guidance system does live in the heart, and it oftentimes it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be scary, and it, you know, it does require a great deal of courage, in my experience, to really follow that. It requires a kind of a surrender, because oftentimes the heart's guidance is not like a nuts and bolts, step by step, here's how you're going to get there. It requires a certain amount of trust. So yeah, that totally resonates for me. And yeah, I guess I want to offer the men listening that are curious about that, something to potentially work with. And I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but, you know, if there was something a little more practical, tangible, that if somebody wanted to say, hey, I'm gonna try listening to my heart a little bit more. I mean, is that something that you believe that men can easily access just by stepping into it, or do you think, you know, they sort of need to be mentored and kind of guided into that relationship? Or is there, you know, specific things that you would encourage they do? I mean, I know you mentioned kind of a trial and error piece. Is there anything else there?
I mean, for sure, having someone to support you and guide you is exceptionally helpful. It's a meditation, right? So you can meditate and go to that place in your body. So let's say that you're all up here and there's too many thoughts, or you're too neurotic or too distracted, or even distracted by addictions, technology, you know, all the things that we do to keep ourselves insanely occupied because we're terrified of what's going on inside of us. And oh my God, my worst nightmare is to sit still and have nothing going on because what might come out of me. So I'm going to run away from that, right? And so part of it would be a meditation where you just relax. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Any esoteric work I do with people, the foundation of it is to learn how to relax your body in a meditative state. And the reason is very simple. You have a kind of a world going on inside of you, right? There's all these things happening inside of you. But if you're in danger, it's not time to go inside and feel into these subtle places. And most of us in the modern world, we walk around in a subtle form of constant danger. Part of that is stimulation. Part of that is it's the, you can talk about like the fight or flight situation, right? It's like we have a nervous system that's designed to have brief moments of fear, adrenaline, insane, oh my God, I'm being chased by a tiger. But then you're supposed to be able to relax when you're not being chased by a tiger. But the way that we operate in the world, we're kind of always being gently chased by a tiger, whether or not that's your own thoughts, or it's what's going on at work, or it's the screen hitting your eyes. We're stimulated in a way that our nervous systems are always stressed out, subtly stressed out. And so you can also think about that, like that's your consciousness saying, it's not time to go inside. I'm worried. There's something to focus on that I need to be alert about. And so learning how to actually go inside and relax your body is a way of telling your subconscious mind that it's actually okay right now. You're actually safe right now. And if you're actually safe right now, it's actually okay to go inside and forget about the outside world for a minute, because you're not in danger.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I would say, so you tension in your physical body and you just relax it step by step, right? You can relax your toes, you can let your shoulders drop, you can let your belly hang out, you can relax your pelvic floor, all your sexual organs, because we hold a lot of tension there. And as opposed to even trying to quiet the mind, you can literally start by relaxing the body and the mind will follow. So you can start this process of relax, 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 and just chill. If there's thoughts, let there be thoughts. Don't try to micromanage your crazy thoughts. Just get into the present moment, where you start to realize that in this exact moment, the truth of the situation is that you're actually completely safe. And it's time to let the body know that. As you do that, it becomes way easier to start to go from head to body, because the body actually becomes a safe place to be all of a sudden, and that is a doorway to deeper feeling. And then, without trying to get too many step by step or technical here, once you kind of have established that relaxation, it's a lot easier to just bring your awareness down to what it would be like if I knew how to breathe into the energy of my heart. So you can think about like a very typical meditation practice is to bring your focus to your third eye, or like in between your eyebrow point. And if you close your eyes and you do that, you'll actually feel like an energy at the tip of your eyebrow point. And the reason is because you're just concentrating right there, right? And so you can do the same thing, but with the energy of your heart. And you relax and you start to bring your awareness down to, let me breathe into my heart, relax into my heart, and just practice what it might be like to feel into my heart. And with a little bit of practice, you actually start to just experientially in your body, you can feel that it's there. And so that's at least the beginning of cultivating that relationship and having a bit of the acknowledgement that, hey, I can actually feel something there, and if I can feel something there, well, that means something, that alone starts to open the mind a little bit to, hey, there's something going on here.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a crucial place to begin, is just feeling safe in the body. And I think there's so much that can arise once we can relax into our own experience, right? And most of us are kind of constantly hyper alert, hyper vigilant. So that's great. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of men.
And presence too, I'll just say really quickly, it's so important because we as human beings have the capacity, even if you're 100% safe in this moment, your mind can be thinking about the future where you're not safe. We have this issue. So we pull out of the present all the time to think about what's going on in our lives, what's wrong with us, what are our issues. I do this exercise in social situations with people too, where I'll look around. If I'm at a party, let's say, I could look around and realize that most of the people here don't actually feel safe, because no one's actually going to attack anyone. Like literally speaking, you're perfectly fine. It's a social situation. But we have these issues where danger can also be perceived as, am I being judged right now? What's this people think of me? How am I standing? Am I comfortable? What's the women think? So there's all these kind of social dynamics that are at play that our minds and our bodies can literally translate to physical danger. And we're totally tense and you don't even realize it, right? And so you have to have that capacity to really start to think about the truth of the present moment, which is, 99% of the time, truth is you are perfectly fine. But we've been wired not to think that way. And part of that is, by the way, not to go too much into the subject of trauma, but part of that is the past as well, right? So traumatic experiences in the past can really put our nervous systems on guard, because the mind goes, holy shit, 5 years ago this happened and it was huge and I didn't know what to deal with it. And so now one of the ways I've decided to do with it is that I'm always alert, and that's not good. It's not good for our bodies. It's not good for our minds. We actually deteriorate under that type of prolonged mental stress that we create for ourselves. So to be able to bring that down, and I know from your work as well, this isn't so different. There's a huge relationship between this. And when we talk about being really present with our sexuality or with partners or with purpose, or, the idea of presence and relaxation and kind of learning how to connect to the body, is relevant in so many different domains. And a pathway to your heart's guidance system is just one of the things you can do with that type of presence and relaxation.
Totally agree. Yeah. So I want to get into your work a little bit deeper, in terms of the transformational work that you do. I think there's a lot of, ever since that whole, what was that? What the Bleep movie came out years ago, right? And this idea of creating our reality, right? That we're kind of responsible for the experiences we're having and the realities that we're creating. And you mentioned on your website something about radical responsibility, and I'd love for you to define that term and how you work with that, or how would somebody integrate that kind of mindset into their life.
Beautiful. Well, one way to think about it, I'll give the group 4 rules. It's something I learned from one of my teachers. It's 4 rules for conscious relationships, but it really applies to everything. Because you can think about it as if you're in a relationship with everything all the time. You're in a relationship with your dog. You're in a relationship with your business as an entity, as a whole. You're in a relationship with your body. And it's actually very good to break things down to a relationship level, because you can actually personify things really clearly as a relationship dynamic and then work with that as if it was a relationship, right? So, like by the way, when I'm talking about the heart, a lot of the type of work I would do was help people kind of personify that and say, if you were in a relationship with your heart and it was a partner, when's the last time you let them actually have a voice? It's like, when's the last time you actually were present with them? When's the last time you went on a date with them? Those types of questions are very revealing, right? And you can grab it and you go, oh shit, that makes sense. So anyways, the idea of radical responsibility in this context, you'd use these 4 rules. The first one is that any situation, it's never about what it's about. Right? So if you're in an argument with your partner about the dishes, it's not about the dishes. It's about something deeper. And it's really about something deeper inside of you. It's about your issues. You can think of the issues, the problem with the dishes is a pathway to what it's really about inside of yourself. And if you're lost in blame, because I don't want to take responsibility, so I'm lost in blame for my partner, I'm actually not going deep into myself to solve the real issue here. But the drama of the dishes is an opportunity to do that. It's the universe, or it's life saying, hey, we're giving you an opportunity to really get some shit resolved so that you can transform your life. Would you like to go in or not? No, I'd like to blame my partner. Okay, great. Then the healing doesn't occur, and probably we'll have another repeat performance of this drama at another moment, right? So the first rule is it's not about the dishes. The second rule is it's not about the other person. It's really not about them. It's about something with you. Third rule is nothing changes until you do. So that's radical responsibility. I need to change, as opposed to trying to force my partner or someone else or my business to change. How about I change? And then the fourth rule is that if that is all showing up as resistance, or that's really difficult, or you're in prolonged suffering in a certain dynamic, it's because you're in resistance to the first 3 rules. You're in resistance to taking responsibility. You're in resistance to recognizing it's not about the surface level issue. And you're in resistance to going inside to figuring out what it's really about. And that's prolonging the drama. And so those are the 4 basic rules. And it's this idea that everything in life is a gift. Everything that's happening to you is a gift. To go inside and look at the underlying patterns, belief systems, issues, fears, doubts, whatever, that are directing your life behind the scenes. And it gives you the opportunity to clean them up. And I'm not saying that there aren't situations where people do things like this. Isn't just shit happens, right? Like life happens. So I don't want to overplay that idea. But you can also think about it as no matter what, it's still your best bet. Radical responsibility is your best bet. Life is life. Everyone's gone through a lot of shit. You know, you were born as this race, this color, this culture. You were born in these dynamics. This person's doing that. Life is doing that to you. The economy is doing that to you. There's a ton of shit that you can't control. But to overly focus on that and put the blame or the responsibility on that actually completely disempowers you. Because, you know, if I'm waiting for my partner to change before I can be happy, or my parents to give, you know, apologize finally, or the world to change, or whatever to change before I can be happy, I might be waiting a very long time, right? So that's a disempowered way to show up to life. Despite the fact that there might be some level of truth to that, it really doesn't matter. Radical responsibility and really focusing on yourself is still the best option that you have. It's that same heroic myth. It's you're on a journey, you're a soul on a journey, and all of this is for you from your perspective, for you to grow and go on that journey. So that's at least a little bit of the radical responsibility piece of that.
Yeah. 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 I've found there's something, at least in my own experience, like really profound and pivotal in those moments where, because I've fallen into the victim mindset a lot in my life. I still do. And there's such a powerful pivot that can happen as soon as I take ownership of, especially the things that I don't like. Like these things that I'm like, no, they did that. It's their fault. I mean, this could be in the moment in a relational battle or conflict that's happening, but or it could be something broader. And it really has such a profound impact of empowering me to feel like I can actually create the change that I want when I choose to move from that place. So, I think
Well,
that's
and I'll give you too how one of the ways that we integrate this with the idea of the heart's compass, because this is kind of so I run a 4-month long course, and this is one of the big things that Earth Pulse is doing right now. We run a 4-month course, and it's all about guiding you through in every area of your life. It's a bit of a university. We talk about tons of subjects from trauma, shadow, sexuality, relationships, money, consciousness, spirituality, waking up, to radical responsibility, following your heart, and everything in between. So we really move through all of it, and we move through it in a way that's organized to really kind of intelligently blend together over the course of the journey. And it's really designed to help someone set themselves free from the inside out and just step into their potential as a creator and or at least a co-creator. And so one of the things we do in the very beginning, a lot in the beginning of the course, we're really looking at radical responsibility and following your heart and how those two things interweave. And so, I have this conversation with clients and stuff a lot where we would say, okay, look, here's the deal. Let's say you're 30 years old or you're 25 years old or whatever, and you have two options at this point. Either you 100% own that everything that's happened to you throughout your life in some odd way is on you. Maybe the experience, like if someone, traumatized you, people go through horrific things. I have too. You might not have had power over that, but you definitely had power over what you made that mean and what you've done with your life as a result of that. You made the meaning out of that. There's no inherent meaning, right? So you at least have to own that you made the meaning and you made all the choices after that. And some of that's based on ignorance and you didn't know better and whatever. All of that is fair enough. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, either you stay a victim and you stay in blame and you give all your power away to create your life and you get the advantage of, well, it wasn't my fault. It's the world's fault, or it's my, upbringing's fault or whatever. It's not me. And you get to kind of feel good about yourself because of that. But you also give away all your power to change your life moving forward because you continue to play that pattern, right? The reverse of that, the kind of extreme, reverse of that is, okay, I'm going to sit with my life and say, I'm exactly where I am because of me. I did it and no one else. Now, that's extreme, but if I do that, I immediately, and it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to look at that and acknowledge that and think about how that could be true. But if you can own that, you simultaneously get all your capacity to decide how you're going to move forward. Because if I created everything that happened before, that also means I have the option to create everything that's up ahead. I tell people all the time, it's like, look, would you rather be free of the fact that the last years of your life weren't your fault, but have no control over the future? Or would you rather take full responsibility over your life and your future? And I say, look, if you got 50 years left, man, you got 40 years left, you got 30 years left. Do you want to own it or not own it? So that's really helpful. And then, one of the other things I talk about with people is I say, once you've found your heart's compass, or you have that deepest guidance, whatever that would be. And I tell people, if you knew that guidance existed when you were 18, 20, whatever, if you knew that existed from a young age and you were taught to start to follow it from that age, and you had been following it all along up until this point, would your life look the same at all? And most people say, no, my life would probably be completely different. And so you also have to consider, well, where you are right now, maybe the circumstances seem like it's not your fault, but you also have to look at the trajectory of your life over your whole life and say, well, look, how did you get here at all? Why aren't you living a completely different life based on your previous choices, right? So there's a whole bunch of other factors besides just the moment that still involve and come down to, yeah, I've had that, I should have left that marriage 5 years ago. I know I didn't do it. I should have quit that job all along. I've been miserable. I should have took that leap of faith. I should have made that change. I should have listened to that voice. Same thing happens with people in their bodies, It's like, oh my God, I had this issue, my body fell apart. And it's like, sometimes shit just happens. You get cancer, whatever, it has nothing to do with you. But very often as well, it's also like, well, this catastrophe moment, did this just pop out of nowhere? Or did you have subtle messages for years or months that, hey, it's time to stop drinking. Hey, it's time to stop eating that way. Hey, it's time to go to the doctors. Hey, it's time to deal with the tooth infection that you've been ignoring, And then all of a sudden this moment happens and it feels like, oh my God, I'm such a victim to the moment. And it's like, maybe, but also maybe you haven't been listening for a long time. And part of what life is trying to do is I believe that it's trying to help us become our best selves. And so it gives us these difficult moments as opportunities to say, look, you've ignored the subtle messages. Now it's time to get the big message, because maybe you'll finally listen. Another example of that really quick would be like, hypothetically, the type of person who's an overachiever, work, and the universe is trying to say, look, you need to slow down. This isn't really what you were here to be living. Your soul on some level is saying, you're off course. We need to error correct. And so it enlists life to help it. And it says, okay, now you have a cold. And then you think, well, a cold's just a cold. It has no meaning. It's just a cold. So I'll get rid of the cold and then I'll go back to work. And the universe goes, oh, okay, you missed the message. We'll wait a little bit longer. Oh, hey, your partner's leaving you because you're never present or whatever. And then it's, oh man, I broke my leg. Isn't that a catastrophe? It's like, well, maybe, but maybe you've been trying to get the message that, it's time to change for a really long time. And now life had no choice but to help you break a leg, to get you to be in bed for 3 months to sit with what you're avoiding. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think challenges, painful experiences are really here to create more consciousness in a way. And it's those moments where we always get those moments. I mean, every moment really is we get to choose how we respond. We can respond from that place of ownership or blaming the circumstance for our discomfort, right?
And again, circumstances are crazy and society's crazy, and there's a lot of things that seem beyond us. But at the end of the day, it's not that it's 100% correct. It's that I do believe it's your best option, despite the fact.
Yeah, I agree. And it's sometimes it's hard to tease that apart from things that we can't really measure why they happened. Somebody's house might have burned down or whatever. Did they create that? Who knows? But maybe there's an intelligence to their soul that called that in some way. And
they're definitely going to create what they're going to make that mean, and that can mean, is this a catastrophe and my life's over, or is this a reset and a moment of radical transformation? Am I liberated because I actually lost my house, or is my life over because I lost my house? It's like there's an infinite ways that you could figure that out, but the goal really is, what's the most empowered meaning you can create for yourself? My definition of empowerment is that exactly. It's people who are truly empowered. It's not that their lives are perfect. It's that they have the capacity to continuously create empowered meanings out of the shit that happens to you.
Love that. That's a great definition. Yeah. Well, Dylan, what I want to do for the last 15 minutes of this call is close it down to the Facebook community, and we just got a couple of guys here with us, but I'd like to take the last portion of the call and just open it up to them for questions, coaching, anything specific that they are curious about. But before I do that, I want to give you a chance to share with the Facebook community anything about your offerings that are coming up, programs that are in the works, anything like that that you want to share.
Yeah, so right now, my company is in the process of training 80 facilitators. It's been a huge process of just putting all my heart and soul into training them, giving them all the tools, and teaching them how to run other people through our foundation course, which is the 4-month course I mentioned. It's called Remember. It has a ridiculous amount of depth and wisdom and experiential wisdom. So we bring high-level information in that course, combined with hour-long guided meditation journeys that we've created that really go, okay, now let's go inside and experience it. So we really wanted to bridge the gap online with, let's not just do information, let's get this in the body and experience so that we can get that, knowledge plus experience equals true wisdom, right? Embodied wisdom. So we designed the course to kind of reflect that. And then now we're training facilitators to take people through that. And so one option for people, right now we're not running any more group programs, they're all full. But if you came to us, let's say to be safe, at the end of May, the company would have launched this program and our facilitators will be trained to take you through. And so if you went through the program, you'd get our entire online recording and all the resources we put in the course itself, plus weekly coaching with one of our facilitators taking you through, and they're fully trained to be a badass coach regardless. We wanted world-class facilitators, so they're not limited to the course. They can coach you about anything, but you get a combination of this incredible program plus awesome coaching with one of our facilitators. On top of that, if someone wanted to jump in sooner than that, I'm open, to be honest, probably for the very last time in a while, to take up to 2 one-on-one clients myself, and I'll take you through our program, plus I'll be your coach once a week. It's the last time I'm going to do that for a while, but if someone in the group wanted to have an interview to talk about that and see if it's the right fit, I'd love to take someone through this program on my own and get to be their coach and their guide through that process. It's going to be an absolutely life-changing journey for whoever steps into it. I can absolutely guarantee that. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to EarthPulse at info@earthpulsecollective.com, or you can shoot me a personal email at Dylan James Lyon, DYLAN, James LYON @gmail.com.
Awesome. That sounds amazing, man. I will also post in the comments underneath the video that'll live on the Facebook page, all the links and contact info. All right. Thanks for tuning in, men of the Essential Man community. And I'm going to close it down.